Me, a bro.
Yep.
He, a dude.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's try it. Okay. Welcome to the We Will Journey podcast. We're talking about faith and life as it happens, and not the glossy exterior we wish it was. What, man? What did I do wrong?
I think you said it's because all the things I was thinking about before. But we can edit that. You got that part good.
Oh.
You got it good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just...
Now it's your turn.
Good?
Yeah.
Wait. We're going to get under the surface. I should have said all those things before. We should have waited down and dirty until after we read this part.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty. Okay. Maybe we should. It doesn't have to be word for word, right?
No. I mean, I gave an interpretation.
Okay. All right. We get under the surface and explore the down and dirty of life as it pertains to our beliefs, our relationships, politics, and absolutely everything else.
Oh, there we go. That was good. All right.
When I'm dead, laying in my coffin, all my friends all gather round. They can say I'm just sleeping, good Lord, the sweet peace I have found.
3, 2, 1.
Well, Seth, how are you today, man?
Doing pretty well, man. I was wondering, at what point did Zoom overtake the video video conference industry? Was it at the start of the pandemic? Because
as far as I know, Zoom became the official pandemic go-to video conference software almost immediately. I don't remember anything else ever being talked about.
Well, it's weird because I feel like there's a whole generation now who, when they think of video, talking on video online, they think of Zoom right away. That's all they think about.
Yeah.
Because it's been a while now, obviously, since we've been living through this. But for me, and even in the German language, they made the word Skype into a verb. Like you say, you're going to Skype with someone, kind of how we would say it too. We'd use it as a verb, kind of like, hey, I'm going to go Skype with Tyler. Here, it's also made into a verb that you can conjugate and stuff. And
right.
And that's what when I lived here for my first number of years, that's what I would use when I was going to do any kind of video call with anybody, probably even FaceTime or whatever. I'd just say, I'm Skyping. But I think there's a whole generation of young people who don't even know what Skype is, really. And it's all Zoom.
Wow.
This is so crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, Skype is the antiquated software or whatever that you would use for that. Nobody really uses Skype anymore that I know of.
I don't know what to do, man. I don't know how to... I'm going to have to change my whole entire vocabulary. But yeah, so that's how I'm doing. How about you?
So you wanted to talk about Zoom, and somehow that tells us about how you're doing.
Whoa,
that's interesting.
That was on my on my mind, as they say. That was
top of mind.
So it's what do you want me to say? Just yeah, I'm doing good. How are you doing, Tyler?
So it's like a figurative little tale of sorts that we have to figure out based on. So you used to you used to see yourself in one way, and that was Skype, right? So you're like, I used to be a Skype guy. Now I'm a Zoom guy. But that's figurative language for something deeper that's going on in your life. Wow. Okay. It gives us something to ponder. That's for sure.
You know what else I pondered when Zoom took off? Then I was like, all I could think of was those old Mazda commercials with the boy who says like zoom zoom. You know?
Zoom zoom. Yeah.
And that's why I was saying that to people, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "What? I can't be the old person."
Yeah, you are the old person.
No.
Well, earlier we were talking about Zoom, and you're like, oh, there's all these new features, and you can break out into small groups. You can do like this random group switching thing.
Yeah.
And so at a deeper level, Seth, what you're saying is that you've learned new skills, and you're now incorporating these new skills into your life in some way. Okay, that's interesting, man. What are these new skills? I'd be interested to hear about that. You know, these new things that are fascinating that you're able to do now that when you were a Skype guy, right? I did the little air quote thing. You know, you didn't have that skill set. I'd just be fascinated to hear about this.
Some things that I...
Too intimate. Too intimate. Maybe the wrong platform to share.
Skills. If we were doing this over Zoom, I'd feel more comfortable.
Okay.
No, I have worked on some new skills during the pandemic, man.
Wow.
That's
what are these? What are these new skills?
Nunchuck skills, computer hacking skills.
Nice.
No, but I mean, I started playing guitar on almost a daily basis since the pandemic hit. During the summer, it kind of fell away because we were doing camps, and had some other things going on. So, besides that, though, weekly, if not daily, I've been practicing guitar, and I had started playing guitar 10 years ago, and then kind of left it in the dust in the wind, and now I've been doing that more and more, and I try to sing. I force my kids to listen to me play to them until they fall asleep, so they love that, possibly. Also,
it's funny that you say you started playing guitar. I've basically quit playing my guitar. So I've given up the guitar for the pandemic.
Is that a new skill, though? Kind of? It's like the lack of it.
Not playing the guitar? Yeah, I would say not playing the guitar is a new skill.
I'm really fascinated by that. Like, so anything that I stopped doing, that could also be counted as a new skill, because then that adds to my new skill plethora of...
Right. I think, why not? I think in this conversation it works. So yeah, definitely. Definitely not playing a guitar. I'm going to put that on my resume. I don't play the guitar. I used to. I just don't anymore.
So Tyler, it says that you've led different ministries. You worked as a what is this? A tractor repairman, a salesman. Also, it says here you used to play the guitar, but you stopped. Let's elaborate on that.
Thank you.
Why don't you explain? We're really fascinated.
Thank you for noticing that. Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I'd love to talk more about my not playing the guitar.
You have made it bold and italicized.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, like a new heading in a different font color to really point out that I do not play the guitar. Yeah. I actually had kind of a I don't want to call it a traumatic situation, but the last time I played, it was in a church. It was a little traumatic in some ways for me. I experienced like a lot of anxiety, and it was just kind of like the situation that I don't know. I wasn't happy with it. How it went. I didn't like how it went. I actually stopped playing for different reasons, but this was kind of at the tail end of that. And so I started experiencing some neuropathy in my left hand, and it was getting to be really painful. So it was making it so I actually had a hard time typing on the keyboard on my computer. Any touch to the tips of my fingers just super painful, and there were like some numb spots on my one finger, and it was just really, really weird. So I primarily quit playing for that reason, and then I also had what was kind of this little mini traumatic event. It wasn't really traumatic. It just caused like a lot of anxiety, and I didn't like how it went, and my hand was part of the reason, and it was painful, and it just was one of those situations where I was ready for the break after that.
Wow. Are you? I think we've talked about this before, but are you then looking at a way to, like, some kind of therapy or something? Is there a way that you can get back to a point where you can play without the painful sensations, or is it kind of you're just going to wait and see what happens?
I haven't really talked to anybody like at length about it. It's just not it's not my career, so it's not a part of my life that I feel like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So I've done a little reading about it, and I guess this is something that happens to a lot of people. I don't want to talk about my health issues though on our podcast, but yeah.
Hey, you got into it. It went from me talking about the skills I learned to you talking about your
not playing the guitar.
Not playing guitar. So I was just following the trail.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But we were actually going to talk about something. I think let's jump into that before we get too sidetracked. But so I found a quote on LinkedIn one time. I can't remember who shared it, and I don't remember the exact quote anymore, and I couldn't find it again.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah. So this is like my best boy, and now I can't think of the word.
You had?
I can think of the word when you recall something. This happens to me on a regular basis.
Oh, deja vu.
No. Is it recollection?
Revelation.
That's not right. No, it's not. I don't know the word, but reconciliation. It's not that. It's not revelation.
Yeah, it's a recollection.
Is that a word? Recollection? That doesn't sound right.
Now it feels like
Anyways,
we were talking about that show, Ted Lasso, where he keeps saying the same word over and over again because he doesn't know the meaning of it anymore, and it doesn't make sense to him. It's like one of those moments, which has happened to me as well. But
it is. Here, let me recollection.
I reckon. It's like reckon.
Recalculation.
I reckon this is the last recollection I had. It's recollection.
Is it? Okay. I don't know. Anyways, so the quote goes something like this. What does tolerating a bad employee communicate to a good employee? Yeah, and I threw out a bunch of ideas to you for our talk this week, and that was the one that you gravitated to. And so, what was it about that idea Seth, that kind of struck you? What stood out to you about that quote?
Email. That's right, I said email. Seems like everybody's got one these days, even us. So if you want to get in contact with us or chat about the weather, you can shoot us an email at wewilljourney.connect@gmail.com. Look forward to hearing from you, or reading from you. Well, I reckon that your recollection of this quote spoke to me. Spoke deep down. So part of it was I was interested in where this was kind of, or where your thought process was with this. I didn't know it was a lost quote among the many.
It is a lost quote
among the many things that have been posted on the internet.
Recollection.
Recollecting.
There's the word. Recollection.
Recollecting.
I'm looking at it. I can't even say it looking at it. Recollection. Yeah, I'm recalling. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Maybe you've also lost feeling in your tongue.
My brain? I think my brain has gone numb.
Man, that's a hard word. English language is... I've always heard English language is the hardest language.
I'm still trying to master it.
I've never heard that. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting little discussion. Like, I've never been okay. I have trained to be a kitchen manager at a job that I had working in a restaurant, and I stopped doing that because I did not like the way it changed the relationships I had to my fellow. What do you say? Fellow workers, coworkers. Yes, and I don't know. It was weird, kind of in a way, how quickly it changed that. Even a guy who was
your subordinates,
even a guy who was a really good friend of mine, who was actually also a believer. There's two guys I worked with that were Christians, and he was like also on my butt, like, hey man, you got to make sure you do this well, and you got to, if you're going to be our boss, and you got to make sure you do this and this and this and this and do this perfectly and whatever, it's like all of a sudden I was like, hey, whoa, like, dude, I'm just trying my best, and it's different, right? And I've heard that from other people as well. In the ministry setting, I feel like it's a bit different. From my experience, at least, like being a team leader, there's not as much of that like competition aspect, or not near as much of that competition in my experience. But yeah, so I've experienced a little bit of the how do you say the quote one more time that you not sure if it's actually a real quote.
So what does it communicates the message of what I read, but what does tolerating a bad employee communicate to a good employee?
Tolerate is that's kind of the key word, maybe. Tolerate. I just was listening to a sermon about tolerating. Basically,
it's saying, what does not firing this bad employee communicate to your good employees? Which I've experienced this before. I have one specific situation that kind of drug on for a while. It was a situation where we were trying to help out a family. We were providing housing for them, and we were also trying to provide as much work as we possibly could for them. And the one family member, one of the parents, was doing some work for us at kind of the subpar level, but primarily just had kind of a personality that caused a lot of conflict, you know, and so some of our other employees would say, you know, how long do we have to put up with this? and so, you know, it kind of created this situation where eventually, you know, I just kind of had to say, hey, this isn't working out, you know, and but by then we were, you know, you feel really conflicted. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was because as a person of faith, I feel like one of our main things is just to simply love other people and help other people in any way we possibly can. You know, through like tangible, by tangible means, right? So if we can give somebody food that needs food, we give them food, right? If they need shelter, we give them shelter. If they need work, we give them work. I have somebody else right now that I'm providing some work for that just needs it, you know? But yeah, so I, you know, when you run into these situations where you're trying to help somebody, but it's not going that well, you know, other people are like saying, hey, Tyler, you're going to do something about this because it's not working, you know, and you feel very conflicted as a Christian, you know, and I'm sure other people in this situation that maybe aren't Christian would feel very similar. I'm not saying that that's the only context you could feel that way, but yeah, so it's hard. I think sometimes you have like these in-between people too that are sometimes good and sometimes not good, and depending on the day, you may feel this way, and then other days you feel totally different about it. So is that you know, how do you gauge that? There's a lot of difficulty when it comes to your feelings, managing people. And so that's one context of this quote and, you know, place where it would apply. And then of course there's the ministry context too, where you may have people that, it could be people you're trying to minister to, or it could be kind of co-laborers on your team and that aren't working out for one reason or another. And that just creates these sticky situations. I think the hardest, though, would really be probably kind of that person you're trying to minister to, and how to. It would probably be. It could be on a one-on-one basis, but you know, where this quote would really come into play would probably be more in a group, you know, setting. So if you have somebody within a group of people that you're trying to minister to, and for one reason or another, they are causing some major distractions to the group. I think that is a tricky situation. Have you ever had anything like that, Seth?
Yeah. So it made me think that how glad I am to have been able to experience being in a leadership role, you know, in various different capacities, different jobs, different ministry settings, because I don't think you really can understand what it's like until you do it. You know, it's like there's the cliche of, you know, my boss is what's a good word in English to use, like a jerk, you know, and you know, he's always getting on my butt, and he's always telling me what to do, and blah blah blah, and you just kind of always blame everything on your boss, and then the more you get to like you experience in life, the more you get to do different things and be in different roles, the more you realize a lot of things going on behind the scenes, you know. So for me, part of it is always like seeing, you know, for example, something that I realized at one particular job that I worked at was tons and tons of employees, big operation, manufacturing company, is, you know, you realize pretty quick that the poop runs downhill, you know. It's not your boss necessarily that is he could be the nicest guy in the world, but it could be his boss or even his boss's boss who's, you know, putting the thumb down and being like, we got to get this done by this day. You need to make sure you get your guys in order. You got to make sure you get your guys, you know, and then off one moment your boss can be buddy, the next moment he can be, you know, hard to work under or whatever. And it's because they're dealing with stress as well, right? So part of it is too is as an employee, I've experienced it on kind of that side of, hey, you know, this guy is getting away with this, or this person says these things and doesn't seem to have consequences or whatever. But that's one side of it, right? That's without knowing any context. You're not knowing the boss at all. I also had the experience where I became really close friends with my boss at a restaurant I worked with, and we would joke around. We'd hang out outside of work. And one time I said something to him at work, and he was like, "Hey, you can never talk to me that way at work." He's like, "I know we're friends. I know we joke around, but like at work, like this is like a professional environment or whatever." And so then I was quickly kind of realized like, whoa, like I need to be careful how I act, because I don't want to be one of those people where they're like, hey, this guy gets special treatment, or this guy talks to the boss like this and it doesn't matter. And so, I mean, there's kind of those things that I've experienced from the employee side of it, right? But then being as a team leader, you see, you know, even in Christian settings, you see how people can, especially when you're working with a lot of people can get ganged up on. People can get kind of put in a box or whatnot. You know, there are certain people that are difficult. There are certain people that require a little more attention, a little more guidance, maybe even micromanagement is such a dumb word, but like, you know, someone where you just need to kind of be a little more attentive and see what's going on, you know, and check in on them more often. And then other people, that causes some tension because they're like, you know, why is this person getting so much attention, or why is this person getting away with this or whatever? And then so you have people come to you and say like, hey, you know, Tyler's doing this again. Aren't you going to go tell him something? Or, you know, Tyler said this behind so-and-so's back. Aren't you going to do something? So then you have like this whole dynamic where you as the team leader are looking down and trying to figure out, okay, this person is causing a lot of issues. This person is not the easiest to deal with.
I just want to clarify. Are we back to the ministry context now in this situation? Is that what you're talking about? So as a team leader in some sort of ministry capacity?
Yeah,
or,
so my experience in this setting would be more ministry, yeah.
Okay, because that was my question, and then you went like a whole nother direction with it for a while. I just wanted to see if we'd circled back around.
Just circling back around. I was trying to answer your question and get some of my thoughts in. So,
okay, that's important that you get your thoughts in, Seth.
Well, I thought this was the point, and that was kind of the point of this thing, is we're basically just...
Don't worry about the specific question too much. Just get your thoughts out. That's fine. And then eventually we may get around to that question. So go ahead. Keep going.
That's what I kind of figured is like...
Exactly.
That's sort of the point,
this is fine.
Know, we seem to think people care about our thoughts, so... I don't know why.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. But we are back. Right. We're kind of in the realm... We're like in the realm of the question that I initially asked you, which was in a ministry setting. Have you ever experienced a person that's a distraction? I just want to remind people.
Trying to recalculate.
Somebody that's a little bit of a distraction to the group.
My recollection is having a hard time.
Recolation. That's not a word. Recollection.
Oh.
That's the word I was. But I was thinking of recall. But anyways, we're getting off subject again. Are you digging our theme music? Well, we dig it too. You can check out more Jane Gilman music at our website, janegilman.com. Or you can download some of her music to your playlist on iTunes. That's GILLMAN. So in this context of ministry, in a group setting, and then you as a leader in that setting, having this person that's causing some sort of distraction, go. Now you take it, Seth. Boom.
Yeah, so like I was saying, you're in these situations, and it's hard to. It's definitely never a good thing as a team leader to throw anybody under the bus, right? And that's something that you can do so easily
in a public way,
right? Just
kind of like call them out publicly,
and you can do that so easily, especially if you know this person is, like say you have a team of 10 people and like 9 people pretty much work well together. And this one person, and I've had experiences like that, where this one person seemingly like just doesn't connect, maybe doesn't get along, doesn't seem to be working inside of the team boundaries or whatever.
But what about the person in the group that you're ministering to? What about that person?
Yeah,
that's
what do you mean?
What about that person? Well, what I'm trying to get at here is, have you ever had somebody that you're ministering to, not in the team, not in the leadership team, but somebody you're ministering to in a group, causing issues in the group? We're talking about, how to effectively deal with that.
Okay, so that's what I'm sort of trying. I was understanding.
Not the team as far as like leadership team that doesn't maybe quite fit in with the team, but what about that person that, since you do youth ministry, what about that youth that just is always causing issues? Is there a time where you would say, listen, it just isn't working, we appreciate you coming on whatever night of the week, we're doing this, but you're just causing too much of a distraction. And it's making it so the other kids can't really participate. Have you ever had that conversation?
Yes, not exactly. So in this situation, it wasn't a Christian youth group, but rather in our youth center setting, where it's a random kind of different backgrounds and different kinds of people. On a lot of nights, mostly not from Christian backgrounds or not believers. And we did have a guy who would get in fights. We've had it a couple times. We'd have people who would get in fights, and that was kind of the issue, where one of them was really hard because it was a kid that I was really fond of, and I see, especially boys, they can
more aggressive, just
more
by nature.
Aggressive by nature. Yeah. But then not only that, but it's like it's easy to just see like them flip out a few times, and you're like, oh, that kid is just a bad apple, or that kid is just, like a crazy, disruptive, whatever. Like we just can't have them around. And so sometimes I try to be patient with those kind of kids. In this one situation, I'm just like, try to talk to them. Sit down and be like, dude, like you just can't do that, I know where you're coming from. I know it's not a one-sided thing, and that's what I always try to work out in these kind of situations is like, all you're saying right now is it's his fault. I already know he did something. I want to talk to you personally about your side of it. what you did. Let's address that, and then we can worry about Jimmy. And so then there was a situation where I had those conversations with this kid a number of times. Other people had conversations with this kid, and then one day I wasn't actually there on this day, but he ended up getting kicked out and saying like, you can't come be a part of this anymore. And this was our tutoring program. He would come to other things too, but then he just kind of stopped coming altogether. And it was really hard for me, because I was like, oh man, this like I said, like I was fond of this kid, but there's a hard thing. There's the thing that even it makes it harder, in my opinion, with ministry is it's not just about like, okay, this person needs to be well behaved and treat others well because that's good for our business or whatever. He works for me as an employee, but like this is a kid we're also trying to reach and love and care for, and everyone has their baggage, everyone has their faults. We're going to love them despite those things. But at the same time, okay, how do you balance that with making sure everyone else in this setting feels safe and feels cared about and feels loved? And that's really a tough balancing act. And in that situation, I understood like the decision from the lady who was running the tutoring program. And I had talked to this kid a lot of times, and so I mean, you can't really say like, we didn't give him a lot of chances, but it still kind of hurt me to for us to have to make that decision. And so that was one situation. Another one, it was an older, kind of student age, so he's a bit older. He also had some issues with getting in discussions and fights and being aggressive and stuff. And with that one, it was a little bit easier for me to come down hard, or for us as a team to come down a little bit, stricter on that, because I viewed him as a little bit more of an adult, and it's kind of like, hey man, I know, there's, because he had some issues with some of the younger guys at the youth center, and they would kind of poke him, or what, not literally poke him, but you know what I mean, like rub him the wrong way. And so then he would get on, he'd get on them and be like, dude, like I understand people can be annoying, but you can't, you gotta kind of be the bigger man in that situation. You're, you're 6 years older than them. You're an adult.
You're 32. He's only 16.
It was more like 20 and 13 or something. But, and that was where I was like, I care about you too, and I love you, but we can't have these situations, where it's like he would get really aggressive and like, threaten to like, beat up this kid or whatever. And it's like, I understand that he's really annoying and he bothers you, but like, that's not okay. And so I had to send him home, and the relationship has never been the same since then. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Natalie and I experienced this as family teachers. Our inclination is to just be very gracious and loving.
Yeah.
We just kind of want to make people feel loved. We want to make them feel accepted, especially when you're working with youth, and especially when they come from backgrounds that maybe aren't the best, and they haven't experienced much of that. And so from our experience in that context, if we just went in with a lot of love and grace, it almost always ended badly. like with almost without question. They would immediately take it too far, and they would feel too much freedom to do kind of whatever they wanted to do. And I think this is true of almost any situation where there is leadership or management, and then there are subordinates in some way, shape, or form. So, whether it's like youth leader and youth in the ministry, that are being ministered to, or a work situation. But when you fail to create some boundaries on the front end, that's when things can get really crazy. So what we had to learn when we were family teachers is that you have to immediately on the front end of everything create a lot of boundaries. Like, these are the expectations. And so we would call it setting expectations in that context. But it's the same with employees. And it's the same with what you were kind of starting to talk about too, with like a leadership team, so, if you don't, as the leader of that leadership team, if you don't set expectations, so everybody kind of knows this is our MO, right? This is how we're going to do business. This is how we're going to minister. These are the lines that we're not going to cross. If you do that, typically things go much, much better, And I think for me, the mental hurdle that I've had to overcome is it doesn't feel loving and gracious and fun on the front end when you go that way, right? Like, I just like to be kind of relaxed and, like, hang out and let's talk and, all that stuff. But I've found that to get to that point, you need all the structure on the front end of it. Otherwise, you're never going to actually be able to get to that point because you're going to be trying to manage chaos, and chaos just doesn't work. And so I don't know. That's been one of my big takeaways from avoiding some of the pitfalls. Just to be able to avoid some of these situations altogether, is to go ahead and just set up those expectations on the front end. This is who we are. This is who we are. This is our culture. This is how we operate. Okay? And if you step outside of these bounds, right, like, there's going to be some consequences for that. And then if you do it enough times, then the ultimate consequence is you just won't be able to be a part of this thing anymore. And I think that makes it a little easier, and it's actually the most fair approach. Because once they know what the expectations are, and then they're making the choice to not follow along with those expectations, it's really not about you saying, sorry, you're not good enough to be here, and that's how it feels. When you have to fire somebody or ask somebody not to participate in something, it feels like, it's like, man, I don't want them to take, like, they're not good enough, right? Or they're not this, or they're not that. And it's just more rejection, right? But if you set those clear expectations on the front end of something, it's actually them making that decision for you. Like, you already set out what the expectations are. If they choose not to follow along with that, they're choosing basically not to be a part of the group at that point in time, It's kind of like with your kids, when you set the expectation and then they disobey that expectation and then they receive some sort of punishment for that behavior, then they basically chose that punishment over whatever it was that they were going to experience that was good, So it kind of takes the monkey off your back in a lot of ways, and things were communicated. And have you done a lot of that, Seth, in like your own ministry? Is that kind of how you try to operate within your ministry? So there are those boundaries and expectations on the front end, or how do you approach it?
Yeah, so we've done, there's been a lot of different things I've been a part of, so we've done different things at different times, and kind of like you were saying too, you kind of learn as you as you do things, and you learn from your mistakes. And one thing here, like in Europe, also there's different things that have gotten stricter, so we need to almost it feels like yearly, like kind of update our expectations, update our rules, like with like photos and sharing photos, and how do you interact with people of the opposite sex, and there's always been very clear things about that, but more like getting stricter and stricter about those kind of things, where it's like, hey, we know you guys don't mean anything like this, but you have to always be, within eyesight of the people. You can never, even if like, a hard thing is because there's a lot of people, anybody who's kind of doing ministry for the right reasons, you have a heart for people, right? Usually. And so that's something where we have to set clear expectations every year at the start of anytime we do like a retreat or like a camp or something like that, or we're doing kind of any kind of ministry, is like, hey, I know you have a heart for people and I have a heart for people, but like you also have to think about everything else, the big picture. And so like if you're talking, like we'll get in a setting where like you're a female counselor and one of the guys is like, hey, I want to ask you a few questions, can we go on a walk? And then you're just like, oh yeah, sure, like I'd love to. And then all of a sudden you're on a walk, and then all of a sudden you're like, a mile down the road and nobody's around, and it's like oh, this probably isn't the best situation to be in, even though what led you to that was kind of just a heart for this person or wanting to help, and those kind of situations
Right.
are the ones where you learn pretty quickly, okay, before we start doing this ministry thing we're doing, there needs to be these kind of guidelines. Hey guys, it's Seth. Some of you might be wondering, I wish there was a way to follow these guys and what they're up to. Well, I don't know if you heard about a little thing called the internet. That's right. If you check us out at twitter.com/WeWillJourney1, you'll be able to keep updated on what we're up to and maybe some future interviews or projects we're working on. Catch yous later. Don't be in the room with someone of the opposite sex with the door closed when you're in a ministry situation, like that. Don't go off by yourself with someone. Always communicate with another team member that this is happening. Like, hey, we're going to be right there on the balcony talking, so that's where we are. That's where you're going to see us. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
So those, as far as those go, it's always very clear. There's other things, where we've had, like with our youth center in general, we've always had the expectations that you need to have respect for everyone, whether it's the teacher, whether it's the fellow student, fellow youth person. You need to have respect. Sometimes then we've had to go further than that and have like an actual list of, okay, these are the 10 rules, boom, 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 these need to be followed, because to a lot of people it makes sense, okay, respect, and you can have that conversation. Was that respectful, how you handled that situation? Did you have respect for that person? And they can clearly say yes or no. But there's other times where it's like, okay, this isn't quite working, and we've had specific rules coming in. So anytime someone joins a program we're seeing that for our camp and for our youth retreats, we always have rules that we go over at the start of the week, and we go through all those kind of things. The regulations from us as a team, also from whatever hotel or whatever retreat center we're staying at. Each one of those places has their own rules that we need to follow. So we go over those things, expectations. The hard thing that I've realized with expectations is like everyone needs to be on the same page, at the start, so you can kind of discuss those and go through them. And one thing that is with ministry, and even more, I think, uniquely with some of this overseas ministry, is you have people coming in to like do a project, run a camp or whatever. And because we do English camps, we have people from the States come, and then you have people arriving at different days. And you have people arriving at different times, or maybe they're coming for 1 week of ministry and then they're moving on, or they're heading back or whatever. And it's like, okay, we have all these sets of things we need to go over. We need to make sure people are on the same page. We need to make sure communication is good. But like, how do I accomplish that with like, Sam is coming on Friday and Lucy's coming on Saturday, but Bill and Ted are coming on Tuesday or whatever, And it's like, all right, make sure we go over all these things with everybody. And that's where things can fall through the cracks. And that's where I've been challenged, or we've been as a team challenged sometimes, is be like, oh my gosh, we never explained to him, like, don't turn the blue handle in the bathroom because the water will shoot out into your face or whatever. So that's kind of our thing. So another thing too is what I wanted to mention is, it's not always so easy, but super important, is when something happens, when you have a conflict, when someone gets, some kid hits another kid or whatever, is something I've learned, is you need to kind of take the time to not overreact and hear what happened, because we had a situation a couple years ago where somebody was ready to kick a kid out and send him home. He had already paid to be there for camp the whole time and whatever, and he was really mad. One of our leaders really mad at this kid, and which I understood. He did something that wasn't the best. But then we hear from the other people that were also there. They're like, "Oh, actually, so the kid he was fighting with stabbed him with a pencil or whatever. So that's why he reacted the way he did." And then it's like, okay, not that it makes it okay to react, but you need context. And so that's something too, that it takes a little patience and it takes a little more digging and working through. But I found that especially with some of the kids that can be labeled as troublemakers or labeled as acting out a lot, is a lot of times they're provoked, also specifically because other kids know that they are easily provoked.
Yeah. I think one of the hard things about all of this is that the reality of firing somebody, kicking somebody out, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, is typically it does sever the relationship. It's really hard to maintain the relationship after that takes place, and so like what you're talking about there is showing a little patience, really trying to understand the context clearly. I've actually had to do that. I had a situation where something happened with an employee that could have been really bad. It was just a potentially really bad situation. And so your inclination, once you hear about it, your knee-jerk reaction is just like kind of drop the hammer, right?
Yeah.
But what we were able to do is instead of doing that, I just basically said, listen, you're kind of on an unpaid leave for right now, and we're gonna take some time. We're gonna all kind of try to have cooler heads. We're gonna look at this situation, and you're just gonna have to be patient. But we're gonna look at this situation, and we're gonna do as much investigation and talk to all the people involved with it, just to kind of make sure we fully understand it. And then we're going to get some counsel, like some outside counsel too, just to make sure, we kind of look at all the different angles of the situation. And actually, we were able to restore the employee back to their role. Because after we kind of looked at all the angles, we understood that, no significant lines were crossed, that as far as, some lines that are crossed, you can't come back from those, right? But then there's lines that you cross that you can restore a person back to their position again. And thankfully, we were able to do that. In the midst of that, we were able to talk about boundaries and some of those things too, and also just communicate that to all of our employees that had that same position. Like, hey, here's something we probably didn't do a very good job talking about prior to this event, but now that this has happened, this is something we need to really be cautious or careful with. And so obviously that's the best outcome, in that situation, because, man, you think about all of the consequences every time you sever a relationship, and they are pretty significant, like that person isn't maybe going to feel comfortable talking to you out in public anymore, and like you've experienced with that youth that you had to ask to leave that program, like, they dropped out of everything after they dropped out of that one thing, So there's these long-lasting consequences So I think it's good to always give things a little time and try to process them as much as you possibly can. Be able to look at the situation as much as you possibly can. Obviously, within ministry, especially, I think, severing the relationship is kind of the
last resort.
The last thing you want. Yeah, it's kind of a last resort. I mean, it's a biblical principle too, like Matthew 18, kind of that whole, go to that person. If they don't respond, bring another person with you. It kind of builds this protection too. It keeps that person that's in the conflict a little bit safe, because now, they bring that other person with them. And, eventually if this person will not listen, then you do kind of turn them over to themselves, so to speak. So there is that point, but Matthew 18 shows this process. It's kind of like a step-by-step process of, trying to deal effectively and graciously and sternly. Like, grace, love, but making sure the message is pretty directly conveyed to this person. Like, hey, this is not okay. And, and if they continue to be unwilling to repent or, make things right in whatever way that they need to, then you just kind of say, okay, then for right now, but it also talks about in Matthew 18, like, the hope is always restoration, so eventually that process of, saying, listen, you can't be a part of this any longer for this moment, you still put out the hope of restoration. The hope is that by doing that, that there will be restoration. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why, Matthew kind of puts that, in that book, there's that process there. And I think we can kind of use that as a tool to understand some of these situations that we encounter. But I've wandered off that path too. I've kind of gone about it in the wrong way before. And I'll put one step in front of another, or not directly talk to the person and talk to somebody else before I talk to that person. And I've made some mistakes in that area. So I've had to learn. I've definitely had to do some learning in that whole process and try to firm up my game, so to speak, because these things are never comfortable and they're never easy. They're always difficult, because you always kind of, your emotions will run one way or the other. Either you just feel anxious about potentially losing the relationship because it's a relationship that you really value, or you can't stand the person, and you just really want to get rid of them, and but there may not be a real good justification for that, because it may be a situation where that person could be restored, and so you have to temper your feelings one way or another sometimes. So
what do you actually prefer, whether ministry or work life? Do you prefer being the boss or team leader, or do you prefer being one of the guys,
I'm used to kind of the management role. Mm-hmm. I've been in that for quite a while now, since 2015. So for the last 6 years, I've had more of a management role, and so that's been kind of a growth process for me. Prior to that, for the 5 years prior to that, so from 2010 through the end of 2014, I was in a subordinate role.
Subordinate. It's a good word.
And, and I didn't mind that. Like, I still had leadership within that role, but I was under other management. And, still now in my role that I have now, I'm still we have a board of directors, so I'm under that.
Gotcha.
And so I think, the accountability is something I always want that. So even if I'm in a leadership role, I don't want to be kind of the last say. I still like to have the people to kind of go to and say, hey, here's the situation. What are your thoughts? Even though I'm typically one that has to enforce it, I still have that structure above me that can kind of help me with, making sure I'm processing the situation in the appropriate way. Hey, we have a new friend of the show to introduce to you today. His name is Klemens Eisner, and we're going to let you check out one of his new songs, Man, Monkey, and Machine, at the end of this episode today, and you can check him out on YouTube as well. We hope you enjoy it.
When the autumn gray of a cloudy day and the wind clears your mind, no more thoughts left to stay, no more paradigm, just remembering the morning light. Oh, how foolish and naive, always let there.
So that's something I definitely really value in the position that I have right now, is just to have that group of people that I can go to and process a situation with, and also, if it hits the fan, they have my back.
Yeah.
Because that's also another important aspect of this. If you kind of put yourself on an island making decisions, we talked about what's that pastor's name? Mark
Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll, right? That's kind of what he did. He put himself on an island where he didn't have the support of all the leadership, and so it all kind of came down on him, in the end, as it should have. But, a smarter and a wiser Mark Driscoll would have, put himself under, in this case, his elders of his church. And he would have made sure that these decisions he was making and these ways of handling, personal matters were really, that he was being transparent with the people above him about it. And that way, he would have handled it totally different. For one, they would have said, dude, what are you doing? And they would have probably had to deal with him. But then he would have been able to eventually, hopefully, if he started handling it in a more appropriate way, then he would have always had that safety net. Those people that say, no, we've talked to Mark about this. We know the situation and we know how he's handling it. We've advised him on it. See, there's like this bubble of protection at that point in time that you have in these situations. So that's definitely something that I do now always with work, is I always bring these situations at least to the president, of our board, and so he knows the situation. Even if I think there's potentially a situation, I start to bring him in on it. Say, hey, just so you know, this is what's been going on. I haven't necessarily even done anything about it yet, but I'm like, this is what's going on. I'm processing this information, So here's the information for you, so you can start processing it as well, and then we can, at some point in time, we can deal with it if we need to. It may never even get to that point where we have to deal with anything, but sometimes we do have to act on it. So yeah, to answer your question, Seth, like, I enjoy the leadership roles. I enjoy managing people. But I also really value being able to have something above me that I can go to. And it gives me accountability. It gives me guidance. It gives me some protection too. So I think all those things are really important.
Cool. Yeah. I think so. One of the things that I look for when I'm, because I'm working in ministry now, I get to often sort of be part of the team forming process, and it's not always the same people, and you're doing different kinds of ministry at different times. And I always want to have people, kind of like you were saying, but I always want to have people, even if I'm the team leader, I always want to have people in my team who I can rely on and who I know, like, this isn't their first rodeo, so to speak. And man, has that been amazing the last few years, like just coming to that realization and just being like, okay, there's got to be this balance of, okay, because, pretty much the main reason we're here is to help build up, encourage, and disciple young people to become the leaders of the church in Austria, right?
Right.
But at the same time, you got to have to balance that with, like, okay, what's effective and how can we do that to the best? Is the most effective thing, me being part of a team with a bunch of young people and me trying to be a jack of all trades and, like, act like I know how to do every aspect of ministry and I can kind of help lead them in that? Or can I have a couple people around me who oftentimes much more knowledgeable than I am, wiser than I am, more experienced than I am, so that I can rely on them? And at the same time, like a couple years ago, I had this guy who's been in ministry for years and years and years, like 3 decades, and he was on my team. I was the team leader, and he told me one day, like, dude, just lead, like, because I would, I'd look to him, I'd look to other people and be like, how, what do you think about the situation? Like, what would you do? And he's like, I'm going to tell you if we're going down the wrong path. But otherwise, you're good, man. I'm here. I'm going to support you. I'm going to back you up. And that's what, that's so amazing. And I think even, I talk to people who are in business and who are looking for employees and stuff. And that's what I always think too. And that's what I've experienced in secular jobs, is just like the team is everything. Like, your employees are everything. And if you can find someone that's like finding gold, if you can find someone that you can trust and that you can rely on, and that makes these situations like we're talking about, in this conversation, it makes the situations with trying to decide, maybe whether to fire somebody or whether to let somebody go, whether to have that hard conversation. It makes them so much easier when you have somebody that you can kind of go to for that wisdom, for that intuition.
I think too, and I just had this conversation with somebody last night. Sometimes we can look at a person on paper and say, man, they make a lot of sense. Right? They've got all the qualifications. Everything looks right.
You mean like in
education,
whatever, like in a hiring process?
In a hiring, or adding somebody to a team, But your gut, everything that you feel is like, they're not going to be a good fit. This isn't going to go well. I've definitely learned for myself anyways to just go with my gut. If I feel like they're not going to be a good fit, then don't try to force it. Because that has always worked out poorly for me. I've rarely been surprised when I've hired somebody or added somebody to a team that But when I've listened to kind of that instinct, it's typically been the right call. And, and so part of that is valuing the good chemistry that currently exists, kind of protecting that. So, whether it's ministry teams or whether it's workplace environments, you really want to be protective of the good thing that currently exists, and you don't want to introduce something that could potentially be harmful into that good thing, So it's just like using a bad ingredient in a recipe. It'll ruin the whole thing, right? So if I use, or if I just use something that went bad, and even if it's just, let's say it's a whole bowl of something, but I use a tablespoon of this thing that went bad, it's going to ruin the whole bowl, right? Like, and the same thing for hiring people or adding people to ministry teams, or even groups of people that are going to be ministered to. I've got a book, actually, it's about a women's ministry in one of our Alliance colleges in New York. And it's kind of like a rite of passage ministry. It's really cool. But every candidate goes through an interview process because they don't want to put the wrong candidate into the program either. So even though it's the people being ministered to, it's like, hey, we have some standards for where you're at in your life for this program. So we're not just going to take everybody. And so sometimes you need to have those kind of standards too, to make sure that, the culture that you have built continues, because man, it only takes one little misstep and the whole culture just kind of starts to crumble, and so anyways, so that's an important part of it too.
Cool, man. That was a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was kind of fun, wasn't it? So it deviates a little bit from some of the things that we normally talk about.
The mystery of oceans deep, the colors of the sky and trees, the endlessness of universe could never be explained. The closest look at molecules, the farthest sight at mountaintops, the thought of steps at strangest stars beyond the human mind. Monkey man and machine, just a little bit, mommy. This is all I came here to see. Ain't that just a little bit, mommy? Logic makes me burst out of gravity, which leaves me with no place to be. The deepest breath with stubborn hope, the truth inside the wildest dream. Believing in reality was written in the code. The sweetest kiss of lovers' lips, the penetrating view of hearts. The universe of being me was made in you, my life. Monkey man and machine, monkey man and machine. This is all I came here to see. Ain't that just a little bit, mommy? This is all I came here to see. Ain't that just a little bit, mommy? Logic makes me burst out of gravity, which leaves me with no place to be. all I came here to see? Ain't that just a little bit more me? Is this all I came here to see? Ain't that just a little bit more me? Logic makes me burst out of gravity. Logic makes me burst out of gravity. Logic makes me burst out of gravity. Which leaves me with no place to be. The hiding and the seeking and the finding and the being and the taste and the size of each thing. The yearning and the glory and the theaters and the story and the substance of life is divine.